Welcome to SOFLA. And SOFLA takes flipped learning and online learning and combines them into a wonderful recipe that makes for effective online learning for your students. And today I'm going to take you on a journey through the cycle of learning that is SOFLA. So join me. We start with what I believe are the 4 essential questions that you need to ask and answer in order to be effective in any flipped learning setting. The first question is, what to move out of class and what to put into the in class and why. Next, how do we maximize comprehension and retention in the out of class work? Third, how do we maximize interaction and differentiation in the in class work? And finally, how do we build in accountability and feedback in both in class and out of class work? And through my years of teaching online flipped learning, I've developed SOFLA because I believe that it addresses these 4 questions in a remarkable way. So keep these questions in mind as we go through the 8 steps of SOFLA. Now notice I said 8 steps. Here we go. These are the 8 steps. So this list of steps, why 8? Well, each step has a job to do, and they link to each other in sequence. Not only that, but they're a cycle, so that we start with the pre-work and move through the cycle and start again with the pre-work. And notice, I'm sure you did, that the pre-work is a different color because it's the linchpin of the whole model. Everything depends upon the pre-work. And if you're experienced with flipped learning, you know that that's an important key to success. And we will address that. So now we're going to go through the 8 steps of SOFLA. Here we are first with the pre-work. Now I use both video lessons and shared readings. This has been an issue sometimes in what is flipped learning. Does it depend upon video? Can you do flipped learning without video? Of course! However, I have found that students interact with information differently. Some students want to listen and watch, like you're doing now, and some want to shared reading, interact with the reading, comment as they go, and read along. So because students like different modes, I do both the video lesson and the shared readings. The key is that in both cases, you're providing explicit instruction asynchronously. So the out-of-class piece is the asynchronous piece. That's what we're looking at with pre-work in SOFLA. And I use these 3 words to describe the pre-work to make sure that you check that all of your pre-work includes these 3 characteristics: structured, interactive, and multimodal. And for the word structured, a shout out to Robert Talbert, who suggested that we add in the word structured to the out-of-class individual space in the definition, official definition of a flipped learning network for flipped learning. In addition, it needs to be interactive because being passive and watching a video explanation like you may be doing right now is not sufficient for processing material. You need to interact with what you're seeing in order to make it sink in. And the third is what I referred to earlier, multimodal. You want to get at listening and reading and writing and viewing. All of those things are the different modes that you want students to use when they interact, where they feel comfortable. The other important piece about the pre-work, when you make it interactive, you need to have targeted, embedded questions and activities. You have to think very carefully about what it is you want them to be taking away from what you are providing in the way of content. And I think this ties in with Julie Schell's retrieval practice, where she talks about the importance of not just looking and staring and memorizing, okay, structured, interactive, multimodal, but rather having the opportunity to step away for a second and see if you can retrieve it. So pop out with an embedded question. I use PlayPosit. Or in the shared textbooks with Perusal, I ask questions and they need to respond. So that's an important piece. The other reason it's important, besides interaction for retrieval practice and learning by your students, is what you obtain from this, which is data. And the data is very important because it informs your future instruction. So when you find out how they interacted with this material, you know what it is that you want to design for the next time you see them. What was more difficult for which students? What was something that everybody seemed to get? Right? This kind of data will help you as you go into the next steps of SOFLA. And let's see what they are. Now, before we go into the other steps, I'd like to talk for just a second about the Google form that you filled out for this session, because I need to relate it to what you experience yourselves. And right now, you're watching a digital presentation. I prepared you for that by giving you pre-work that included 6 items, and each one was in there for a reason. So I need you to understand more deeply about how to construct pre-work so that it taps into what students need in order to prime them for your session with them live. So the first thing I gave you was a very short introduction and outline for the pre-work tasks. What was my goal there? I wanted to, here I am. You see me, here I am. You're more connected. There's a bit of a relationship forming there. And also to help organize you for what the pre-work is going to contain. The next thing I did was ask you what your pressing issue was. It's very important to find out a student's priorities because they may not be the same as yours. When you ask someone their pressing issue, you learn a lot about why they're in your class or your training, right? And so that data will help you to find out, oh, this is what they care about. I want to build that into my lesson. Right? The next thing was an idea that you already have for offering your instruction online. And that's important for activating prior knowledge, right? Which we all know about. So you want to find out, where is this person? What are they thinking of already? What do they have already? Which is great because you have a group of people and they can share with each other. And so you can crowdsource those ideas and we're already off to the races. Next was a successful experience as a learner, because it's important to wear both hats, teacher, learner. And your students can do that too, because we have a component in SOFLA that enables them to take on the role of teacher. And you'll see that later. I like to have you reflect as a learner because sometimes teachers lose touch of that. So think about your own online learning. What did you find effective? How do you feel about learning online? It's always good to start with yourself whenever you're planning something that's going to affect others. Not because they're the same as you, but because you get into that mindset that makes you more careful about what you design for other people. Then I asked you, where do you live? Because it's fun. And I live in White Plains, New York, USA, and I'm curious to see where you all live. And that also helps to build a learning community and get people connected with each other. Oh, you live there, I used to live there. You want to build an online community, a professional learning community among teachers and a student learning community for your class. And that's extremely important because people don't feel as connected online, and you want to make sure they feel as connected online. And it's amazing how just where you live can start that right off. I also gave you readings. I gave you a choice though, reading 1 or reading 2. And I asked you to simply read and give me a takeaway. And that also shows me not just that you did the reading, because you have to come up with something and it has to be in the reading, but also it tells me what resonated with you about the topic, in this case, SOFLA. So I hope that this sample of the Google form and the pre-work for this presentation helps to get you a little bit into the idea of how many different aspects you need to tap into when you tap into pre-work. Now we're ready to go to step 2. And step 2 is the sign-in activity. Now, the sign-in activity depends upon the circumstances that you're teaching in and the audience, who is it that you're teaching. But there are many different types of sign-in. Important to remember is that you have freedom to make any kind of sign-in. It doesn't have to be a specific question about the video lesson or the shared reading. It can go from the cognitive realm to the affective, and we're going to take a look at that. So an example, 3 weeks ago, I don't always do my own video lessons. Sometimes I pull from the greats, and Steven Pinker is definitely one of the greats in my field at any rate. And I had them watch a Pinker video, and I asked them what surprised them, puzzled them, inspired them the most. And that generated a wonderful discussion. If they hadn't watched the video, you see? So that was the pre-work from that particular night. On another night, I asked about a relationship. This was a different course, a relationship between the deficit view of students and social justice, which is a chapter in their book that they were reading by Sonia Nieto. And there we go. It's my house. Okay. Can teachers help? And I asked them, how can teachers help? But they needed to have read the chapter to understand the concepts of deficit view, social justice, and how they relate to each other, and then move to the next step. How can teachers help? So everybody, if you notice in these first 2, is putting something different. This is not a recall question. This is not a comprehension question. Okay? This is to take it to the next step, to process it. And everybody has to write something different. They know that. They're not duplicating, they're coming up with their own ideas. And they put their name because it's a sign-in. This is how I take attendance. This is how I make sure people are in class on time. And believe me, they want to know what the sign-in is. Some of them will peek into class early. I let them come in anytime they want. They peek in early because they want to see what the sign-in is. That's fine. That's okay with me. I don't want to be punitive about any of this, okay? So sometimes I even give them a hint what it's going to be, just to make sure. However, if you look at the last 2, it's also important to recognize our students as people and what they might be doing or going through outside of class. And so as long as most of your sign-ins address the cognitive piece and the content of your course, you throw in some of these other types of questions sometimes, because it really is important that, again, they have a learning community and also that you connect with your class on a personal level. So one time I did ask the elephant in the room question: how has COVID-19 affected you personally and or professionally? And some of them answered personal things, some answered professional, and again, we had a very good discussion based on what they had posted. And then another one just last night: we're finished now. I turned in my grades. What are your plans for the summer? Heck, why not? It's the end. Let's ask that. Okay. So now you have, I think, a good idea of step 2. So let's go on to step 3. Step 3 is what I call whole group application. Now, this is the dangerous step. Dangerous? Why do I call it dangerous? I call it dangerous because it's teacher-led. And when it's teacher-led, there's always a chance that you'll dominate. And that's not the intent here. Remember, you had your chance in the pre-work. You had your chance to have them watch that video lesson and read your articles or the textbook, whatever you post for them. This is for them to process. And so you're going to be stepping back, but you're leading from behind. What you're doing is structuring an activity that they need to do together collaboratively, and they can use their audio and webcam, they can use chat, they can use whiteboard, you can send them to a Google Doc, whatever it is you want to do, as long as everyone's participating. And the idea is that you are either clarifying something that in the pre-work didn't seem that clear, and so you give them an activity that will help clarify it, or you're doing some kind of an application of the idea that takes it to the next step, and they develop what they learned in the pre-work into the next phase. And this produces some product that they can see that's evidence of their joint learning. And I always end this, and in fact I also do this with assignment, with my famous question that all my students know, which is, what do you notice? And I like to ask that question because I want students to see patterns. I want them to not just do an activity, but step back and debrief. Why did we do it? What did we learn from it? What do I see now that I see the whole thing laid out? It usually ends up looking like some kind of a graphic organizer or something like that. It depends on what the activity is. But the group work is really an important part of this, and they're working together, and they get a chance to see that. Okay? So that's step 3.